The fight for climate change has reached a so-called tipping point. That is, the point where human intervention will no longer fix the climate crisis the world is facing. Our team, Generation Green, seeks to provide a Gen Z perspective on what must be done to combat climate change before it is too late.
Our thesis, the concept of social and solidarity economy and social entrepreneurship, while they may be effective at a local level, are not sustainable enough to solve the climate crisis and thus lead to a green Europe.
They do, however, provide insights that can be applied to the broader environment's movement at corporate, government, and consumer levels.
By transforming the already existing economy instead of creating a completely new one, we have a higher chance at implementing the broader systemic and necessary changes prior to the environmental tipping point.
In this video, we seek to achieve 3 goals. First, we want to recap the essence of Professor Blanc's lecture on social and solidarity economy and social entrepreneurship.
Second, we will explain why these principles are not enough to make transformative and sustainable change. The limitations, namely their lack of geographical reach and the scope of their impacts, have been underestimated in the lecture.
But, however, the notions of SE and SSE can still be utilized by exploring the impacts of the lessons of SE and SSE on businesses, governments, and consumers.
First, let's quickly discuss our key takeaways from the lecture. In Professor Blanc's lecture, social entrepreneurship is defined as, quote, market-based activities with a mission. Social entrepreneurship values the mission of the organization, and it adapts to the project rather than remaining rooted in firm statutes. Following this thought, SSE and SE are not only a fairly simple and low-risk opportunity to reach sustainability, they substantially challenge the current economy. They create a new, locally sourced economy driven by the active choice of the consumer.
Well, it's simply not enough. And it's not enough on 2 fronts.
It's not enough in a geographical reach. Even though these limitations to the SSE and SE model were acknowledged by Professor Blanc in his lecture, we believe that they were underestimated. What works in France might not work in other countries. Placing the burden for sustainability on consumer choice is quite unfeasible and risky. For instance, if we go further east to Bulgaria, would that still be possible? When challenging right-wing governments, goodwill may not be powerful enough to create this new economy. More importantly, climate change does not stop at borders. If we want to achieve a green Europe, then staying within Europe is, you guessed it, not enough. We'll have to aim for a green world. According to the Trends in Global CO2 Emissions 2012 report by PBL, out of the top 10 polluters of the world, only Germany is a fully European country that is part of it.
Second, there is not enough impact. The CDP Carbon Majors report from 2017 shows that only 100 companies are responsible for 71% of climate change. SSE and SE will not be able to make impactful changes prior to the environmental tipping point. They cannot bring the drastic change we so urgently need. It seems unrealistic to even imagine how a local business could replace global energy firms or fast fashion brands. Assuming we could overlook these constraints, the creation of this economy is unlikely to enact change faster than tackling the top 100 firms first.
We're now going to look at a survey we conducted, for which we got over 108 answers. This survey was only conducted with European students. More than the majority of people had never heard about social and solidarity economy. 71% of those same people never took part in any of those kind of initiatives, which shows again their lack of reach and impact. Local initiatives actually offer a space for innovation and creativity that must be adopted at the global firms level to address the urgency for sustainability. We should reform the economy with a think global, act local mindset. For big firms to adhere to the lessons of local approaches, efforts of sustainability could capitalize on the reach and funds of those big firms while learning from the proactive innovation initiative of those SC and SST. As reaching sustainability should be the responsibility of the producer and not that of the consumer, the EU Parliament could impose those new regulations on the firms to force them to act more local, acting as a trustee representative and doing what is in the best interest of its population.
So what can we actually gain from SSE and SE, and which kinds of levels can they help us? One of them is for global firms. Here, SSE and SE's local feature can function like a pilot project. Professor Blanc discussed SSE and SE as tools of innovation. This can be more broadly applied to making larger production more effective and environmentally friendly. Add the economies of scale that large businesses benefit from, and we might be able to have consciously produced and affordable products. Similarly, they help governments as a test field for new policies.
Most importantly, perhaps, they increase knowledge and awareness for consumers. Dr. Janine Beekman, a social psychology professor at the George Washington University, explores this through the psychological ideas about conformity and private acceptance.
The normative idea is when you sort of comply or you go along with, in this case, like a social movement, or just to fall into the norm. Because it's what other people are doing. When you learn about other people's opinions, you might conform that way because you want to fit in and you want to look cool. Being on social pressures to fit in is one thing, but normative conformity, it leads to public compliance. but not private acceptance.
Combining the local initiatives from the SSE and SE framework with the global firms would therefore allow for a broader public to adopt private acceptance.
Looking at our survey, that is exactly what comes out. While the students are more likely to think that sustainability should be tackled and addressed on a global scale, more than 70% are in favor of that. You can see that more than 62% are in favor of taking local actions themselves. So while they realize that it is more important to be on a global scale, they're simply not as prepared to start acting on a global scale.
Overall, we need to see a worldwide revolutionary battle against climate change before we reach the environmental tipping point of no return. So our takeaway is just that SSE and SE can bring significant value to the table and function as a test field, which is incredibly important, as we cannot risk making big mistakes on a global scale. However, without any bigger global action to go alongside and to enlarge upon the findings of that SSE and SE model, that will not lead to a green Europe. SSE and SE initiatives are simply not impactful enough, feasible enough, inclusive enough, and not fast enough. With that said, there is no way to go global without starting off local. SSE and SE may very well serve that role as a stepping stone, the base upon which we can transform the current economy to achieve the levels of sustainability we require.
To our judges and our audience, thank you for your time and consideration. Stay safe and healthy.